Hello and welcome back to Galactic Goddess Podcast. I'm your host, Radhaa, and today we have a very special guest, Miss Captain Cosmic. And she's an intuitive, a psychic, and she lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Today we're going to be discussing all about galactic beings, and please share your experiences.
Hi, Radha. So again, my name is Captain Cosmic. I had an experience in 2015 that was very awakening for me. I ended up having a close encounter with the fifth kind, and it came as a surprise, but it came after many years of trying to initiate contact with star beings. So basically in 2013, I had begun the process of trying to give permission that I was open to such contact. And it was only 2 years later in 2015 that I ended up their ship. And I would also witness this with two other individuals who were close friends of mine. And they had also given permission to.
You guys went together?
Yeah, so we were on a camping trip in it was in Spanish Peaks, Colorado, and this is right on the border of Colorado and New Mexico. And it was nighttime, and we were just hanging out in our tent, and one friend went outside the tent, and I heard a lot of shuffling around, and I was like, I wonder what's going on out there. He runs back into the tent, and he looks me straight in the eye and he says, I just saw an alien. And I paused for a second, and this wasn't unusual with this. I always had sightings of different kinds, and I hadn't had a sighting of my own at this point. So I looked at him, and I very strongly wanted to believe him, but there was that voice of doubt, that voice of reason that was kicking in, where I almost just was hesitant. So something triggered in my mind, and I was like, instead of doubting him, why not ask him to show you? So I told him, I was all, show me, I want to see. And so he's like, okay, let's try to see if we can find it. So we open up the tent, and we're like peering out, like I said, it's nighttime. There's like this grass field in front of us, and he points directly in front of us, maybe like 5 feet away, and he says, right there. And he starts tracing it out. And I say, I don't see anything. And he's gone. He says it's invisible, but you can see its light body. And it was at that point that I realized that I could see it the whole time, but that it was like this like field of static. It was like a glimmery reflective light, but I was like attributing it to like my eyes are messing up. And it was in that moment that I locked eyes with the star being, and I could see its face, and it was ever changing and moving and energetic, and it looked just like a giant like panther or a cougar or a feline creature, and it was like huge and hunched over right there in the grass. And it was in that moment that I was like, oh my God, I can see it. And right as I said that, it dissolved into a green light, and it literally almost like beamed up into a ship above us. And as it was beaming up, it had this like high frequency pitch noise. It was like, woo! And above us was a giant triangle ship, and it itself was cloaked. I could see the night sky through it, but I could still see the outline of the ship. And then this being goes directly into the center, and then in a blink of an eye, the ship was gone. And that pretty much started my whole journey of exploring, the cosmos and all the star nations and of that nature.
That's so beautiful. And guys, I just want to tell you, a lot of times when I have guests, we're all high frequency. Sometimes our frequencies, they just can stop in time for a second. So just know that's part of the process, right? You know,
Yeah.
because it's true, when we come together in these high frequency ways and share these high frequency experiences, sometimes like the wife, like the internet or the carriers, they have a hard time holding that, because we're really sharing, you know, we're disclosing, and it's all about cosmic disclosure and sharing our experiences, so that we can understand that there's so much more than just this one particular reality, that we think we have it all like under control, you know. You know, in this reality we think like we know everything, you know. There's nothing more besides here. Most 99.99999% of people think like beyond the atmosphere there's nothing. It's just space. It's just blank space. Like we're like the only thing that could ever exist in this whole entire universe, multiverse. And I love that you shared your experience and how it's very beautiful and kind of it's very sweet, you know. I like that, because we think of animals so often as just dumbed down beings, and to think that there are even, you know, higher beings of this nature, like a cougar or a panther or something of that nature, a feline being that is perhaps much more advanced than we are. That's kind of mind-boggling for us to think, because we think we're the highest species on top of the pyramid, like we're the greatest that ever existed. And, you know, we fail to think that maybe there are other species that are actually ascended, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, you know, upon investigating, after this experience, I had to Google everything, and I was just like, lion beings, and who was this that I, ended up communicating with, because I had a moment where when I saw them go into their ship, I closed my eyes, and in my mind's eye, I said, "Thank you." And right then I got a big glow of green light in my mind's eye, and it was like a high frequency pitch noise, and I just was saying, "You're welcome." And so we acknowledged each other there, and I was like, okay, now that we've had this communication, I want to know more about, who I talked to. So, I found out that they were, this being was likely from the Lyran star system, and it's, kind of where lions come from. And they are basically the ancestors of all the feline species that are on our earth today. So it definitely has, awakened me to how everybody has consciousness. Everybody has these like cosmic origins, cosmic ancestors, and we've all been dropped here on earth together to learn and grow and go back to our roots.
That's so beautiful. So you and your friends were actually energetically, were you beamed up into this ship, or what was that experience like?
So after we saw that ship, take off, I had a friend who looked out into the distance and ended up seeing a mothership like parked in the canyon, like several miles away. And upon seeing this mothership, we ended up kind of seeing that there was a bunch of like drone and scout ships that were coming out from the center of this mothership. And before I knew it, they were all around us. There was like hundreds of them. It almost felt like being swarmed by like flies or birds or something like that, because they were kind of no bigger than like a CD or a disc or something. And they were all sorts of different shapes. Some of them looked like they were birds, but were very clearly not birds. Other ones looked like discs, and they started flying all around us, very like close and right past my face. And they ended up. What was that?
There were different shapes.
Yeah, different shapes. So it led me to believe that this mothership was perhaps a portal, and maybe just all different types of species and kinds and families were coming through with their, special starships. I ended up seeing them kind of vanish before my eyes. They would grow larger and smaller, and then they would poof into light. They would all make these like very strong like frequency sounds. And from what I recall, none of us went onto a ship, but I think that there was an instance of missing time, because before we knew it, all of this started around 3 a.m. And by the time it was done, the sun was up, and it was like 6 or 7 in the morning, and it felt like we had only been standing there for maybe 40 minutes. There was an instance where my friend who originally saw the first being and told me about it, at the very end, when all the ships had gone back and everything settled down, he went back into the tent, and he had dreadlocks, and one of his dreadlocks just fell out.
Wow.
And so this kind of a symptom of being taken up into a ship, or being like taken for a little while, is hair loss. So sometimes your clothes are on a little funny, like you could have a shirt on inside out. And I strongly believe that he was taken into a ship, and we may not have known it in our consciousness, but he had a very symbolic sign where like this thick piece of dread fell from his head, just clean off. And he never had any sort of hair loss or anything like that before. So though we may not remember an experience, I'm almost sure of it, that there was a visitation under the ship.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, it sounds like these beings were very open, were very kind, were very benevolent beings.
Right. Yeah. And that's what I got from them. When I was in their presence, I felt pure joy, bliss. I almost wanted to cry of happiness. I felt like all of a sudden everything I had ever known was coming true. I always knew there was magic. I always knew there was, you know what I mean? Like things in our unseen realities. I knew about being able to appear and reappear in a blink of an eye. And all of a sudden it was just being confirmed for me. And it was just incredible. And, all 3 of us were in a very happy state prior to this event happening and following the event too. And so I think it really depends on your vibrational state. When these sort of contact situations come through, are going to determine how the contact goes along and happens. But from the moment that I started trying to initiate contact and I started putting out the permission slip, I welcome this. I want to attract this. I always said that I wanted it in the highest and best way, from a loving vibrational state. I want to interact with beings of love and light. So I was always very clear in drawing my boundaries of what I wanted to experience.
That's so beautiful. I think that's so beautiful. Yeah, I've had a very flirty experience with my galactics. And yeah, it really depends. I think it's interesting because I find a lot of people have a lot of fear about it. And I could go into that. That's a whole nother story about, fear. But when I started my healing journey, when I reactivated certain parts of me, all of a sudden I was getting contact again, which I had actually put out the permission to put out. And I was seeing things, I was living in Malibu, right off of the coastline, and I was seeing motherships, and then I would see like lots of little ships go, and I would have friends come over, and I'd be like, not to be weird, but are you seeing that right now? Because, and a lot of times they'd be like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, wait, what am I talking about? You mean the huge mothership that's on the ocean, So what do you say to people that, like, when you can see something but somebody else can't, there's this sort of unfortunate barrier where some people can see and some people can't.
Right. Yeah. So that was kind of a part of my situation as well, where I was camping with a big group of people, and my immediate group were the ones that were with me and being able to see all these ships and these beings that were all around us. But then there was another individual, and I didn't know him too well, but he seemed to be very caught up in the physical reality where, he was a little bit like inebriated, had been drinking and things like that. And he approached us and asked us just some sort of question, like he was looking for his cell phone. And it was at this time that there were ships flying all around us, like right past my face. So I asked him, I was like, well, do you notice anything in the sky right now? Do you notice anything unusual? And he kind of looked around and he said, no. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, okay, thank you. And I thought I would weird him out by my question, but he was just too preoccupied with his own things. And I think that's what it is that where are you in your headspace when things are happening? When you go out to the woods and you're camping, are you just stuck in your zone where you're thinking about your bills and how you're going to make money and all your concerns, or even just like when you're going to have your next drink or something like that, or thinking about your physical needs, how your hunger and all that? And we expanded further than that, where we were very connected with our environment. We were very appreciative of the trees, of the grass, of the sky. We had been watching the clouds all day, and we were just very awakened and aware and open, where it wasn't about our physical bodies at that present time. In addition to that, we had also been having very high-minded conversations that whole day, where we were talking about, the nature. I was a lot younger at this time. I was talking about the nature of God and creation and the universe and different philosophies. And we had all just watched a podcast on quantum physics. So it was like turning a lot of gears in there, and we were like communicating this to each other. And I personally feel that the star beings heard our conversations and were attracted by our very vibration. And so, your vibration's really going to determine how much you can receive and see.
That's so true, because there's so many people out there that are like, oh, that's not real, this and that. But I'm like, well, I remember being a younger girl, maybe 13 years old or 12, and I believed in fairies before. And, no one else believed in fairies. And so I went through the park and I was like talking to the fairies. I'm like, I love you. And I was just sort of in a place of gratitude. And I forgot I brought flowers. I did something, And then before I left, I went with a group of friends. I was sitting in the back of the car like this, looking back. And then these little lights, they were like, what's the color? Fuchsia lights came up, and I felt like they were just like glowing at me like, hey, we're here, thank you. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I had turned my back around, and I was like, well, I really wanted to see you today, And then I was the only person that saw them. And then I asked my friends, hey, did you see that? And they were like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
So, because I think the magic seekers find magic, because we are open, we wanted it, and we believe in it, we had some experience with it. And I think it's part of who we are in our encodement, and we're here to help bring this information forward, to help people feel more comfortable, like, hey, it's okay, it's not all bad, it's not all gonna hurt you.
Right.
A lot of people have a lot of fears about what that could be. And I will be the first to say that there is benevolent and there is malevolent. And what we're discussing right now is really benevolent, and how your own heart frequency, your own heart code can actually activate contact with other beings, right?
Right. Yeah. I just, I feel like on my spirituality path, you start hearing about, you get what you put out, and you start manifestation, where you have to have a positive reinforcement of your desires and your needs and everything that you want. That if you're sitting around in a feeling of lack, then you will only see lack. The universe gives you evidence of what you believe in. So my thought around it was, okay, well, if I choose to believe in this magic and this, a spirit, spiritual gifts and all this, like, things that go beyond the laws of physics that we understand today, then maybe I'll be able to see it for myself. And it was, I started listening to a channeler, and he would channel an extraterrestrial being named Bashar. And Bashar would say in his messages that it wasn't about seeing in order to believe, that we needed to believe first in order to see. Because, yeah.
That's really, really important to hear.
Like, the thing is that extraterrestrials, interdimensional beings, star people, they are operating off of free will, and they're not allowed to intervene with our free will. We have our own sovereignty and our own agency, and we're allowed to define our boundaries. And so if we put it out there, no, I'm scared of ETs, I'm scared of all that stuff, they'll hear that and they won't interact with you. And it came down to, like, if you start helping to eliminate that fear by trying to understand and educate yourself about them, then that's when you can offer, hey, I am open to contact. And then that's when the contact can start happening. So you really get to establish your boundaries. And my boundary has always been to work from the heart space and to attract in high vibrational beings. I had always heard that your frequency determines the experience you're going to have. So if you're vibrating on a very high frequency, low frequency entities can't even reach you, because they would have to match your frequency, and at that point they wouldn't be low frequency anymore. So whenever I'm doing these sort of telepathy communications or contact, I'm always operating from the highest frequency possible, because the moment that I start going into fear and doubt and lack and anger, that's when I'm susceptible to lower beings.
It's so true. And then there's this big controversy because there have been quite a few abductions, and there's been,
Right.
not quite a few, like a huge amount of abductions and things like that. But those are totally different beings that we're talking about.
Right.
And you have to remember, we have soul contracts too, different kinds of soul
Yes.
contracts, and that's not about judgment. Like, oh, because you had this experience, you were low frequency. Or you're just high frequency. It's about, like, sometimes we need the full spectrum experience, like the whole gamut for us is to experience it all. Because a lot of the viewers are very afraid, and a lot of people I've worked with personally have had more on the negative experiences, but I really, really, really want to bring in more positive experiences, because that's so available too. It's not one
Right.
or the other. I really come to understand there are so many infinite species. It's not just like one species. It's not just the Greys. It's not just the reptilians. It's not just the Lyrans or Arcturians. Like, there is a gamut of hundreds of, maybe even thousands of, hundreds of thousands of different species, and it's not for us to really judge, because we have to learn what you were saying about sovereignty, about having our own free will, and then calling in the experiences that we want. In my earlier life, I had some negative experiences with negative ETs, and but I've had a lot of really positive experiences throughout my life with positives too. And everything in our life serves our purpose and our lesson. But in order to really decide, like, hey, I want to call in something magical, meaningful. And I remember being that little girl saying, I want to see fairies, and then seeing them. Like, we're here to experience that. So I love how you manifested what you wanted. And I think that's important for people to hear, that you can manifest experiences that activate your heart, activate your soul, that you can co-create beautiful experiences.
Right, exactly. Like you were saying with situations with abductions, where as fearful as they were, that more information is starting to come out now about how most people ended up making a contract prior to coming into this life, or like seemingly unconscious contract to agree to these abductions because they were most likely aiding in the evolution of these species that they were abducted by, in genetic engineering and things like that. Most of the time, these ETs that people were abducted by could turn out to be future lineages, and that their DNA ended up helping in allowing this species to survive and thrive. And the reason that in the past they've seemed so fearful, yes, there's been, ETs that haven't had like the most highest and good intentions, like the reptilians and things like that. But it was said that species like the grays and even like mantis species were actually, they just operate on a different level, where they have such a high intellect that they've almost moved emotion to the wayside.
They're like right here.
And so, yeah, very blank faced, and they almost can't comprehend our emotion. And that's why a lot of the times they would do abductions, because they wanted to integrate emotion back in, because they went so far away from emotion, and it ended up being very detrimental to their kind. And they found out that they're not more powerful without emotion, and so they ended up almost honoring and appreciating humans because we have such a vast range of emotion. And so we often read them as very blank-faced, and it makes us scared because they don't have emotion. But they're also, on the other hand, where they can't even read our range of emotion. So it's kind of just almost like a cultural difference in a sense.
They're like, what are you? We're like, what?
Yeah.
They're just like,
Yeah.
come with us.
Yeah, exactly. So they, people, in terms of like the Galactic Federation, which is kind of like the cosmic government that oversees everything in the universe, they often call in the mantis people that look like praying mantis and bugs and everything, because the praying mantis people come from a very objective point of view, where they aren't biased with their emotion. So whenever there's like something that they have to settle, they call in like the mantis people, who can give them a very like non-biased, opinion on what sort of stance to take, because some of our star brothers and sisters are like us, who have a very deep range of emotion, because they are connected to us like in a humanoid way. So
I want to say, like, our emotions are a gift, and like she says, there's something that they desire, they need, and they want, and that's why they genetically, took some of our DNA and manifested a sort of hybrid race, because they need that DNA. They realize there's value in feeling. Of course, I'm a triple Pisces, so I feel like everything all the time. I have no filter. And that was part of my earlier years, was, I guess, to be somewhat of a contributor to this new hybrid race,
right.
And we are going through different timelines, and I've done channelings before where I've been told about the different timelines that we're on. And one of them is this transhumanism timeline, where everyone's embracing transhumanism and thinks it's cool to put in chips in your eyes and your brain, and integrating so much with technology that now they actually turn into the grays. So really, the grays are the some parts of the grays are the humans of the future who took transhumanism, but they couldn't evolve, because you can evolve on AI. You can't. You can some more like modular stuff, but then you just become a gray. You can't. You're no longer the human that was in you is no longer there. And I'm saying this because there's a huge push for transhumanism. A lot of people are pushing it. They're bringing it down through celebrities, integrating them. It's part of the programming that we're going through. So we have to say no, I'm not going to do the transhuman program, because if you want to be a gray, go down that transhuman path and you might find yourself there. And that's where people like, some people like me have to contribute to helping restore that distorted aspect of that timeline. So we have to be aware of the choices we're making right now. And it's quote unquote super trendy to be like a cyber transhuman, be like, oh, I got a chip in my brain, I got a chip in my eye, everything I see is like recorded, I'm so cool. It's like, actually it's not that cool, because we're actually organic beings, and the way that we ascend.
Right.
So if you have all those cool gadgets, your ascension processes may not happen on our timeline. It may not happen on our timeline. You may not be able to actually move to the ascension process because of those artificial pieces that you integrated and said yes to. They will hinder your ability to go higher.
Exactly. What do we say intuition is most of the time? And it's feeling. We're going off of feeling and what feels right. And if we aren't connected to that anymore, and we only have a gadget that tells us what to feel, then we end up being misguided. And in addition to that, being so technologically integrated ended up leading to the grays not being able to reproduce on their own anymore. And they weren't having, intimate relationships, and therefore their population was dying out because they weren't able to reproduce, and they needed to integrate back that human element. What is it to be human? It's to feel. So they had moved so far away from that they were losing, all sense of themselves, and they thought that they could just clone themselves or reproduce or artificially reproduce, and it's just not possible.
I don't want to be on a timeline where you can't make love. Where you can't feel,
yeah.
where you can't have that magic, because that's what makes being a human so incredible, is those moments of magic. And to think like, oh, I'm just going to be so, tuned out, and you're going to have your emotions, like they're going to tell you what to think, because once you tune into that AI, you're actually connected to this big grid, and it's a dark, I did a channeling. It was a dark virus. So like all the AI that was created and is being created sort of has this dark virus, and the AI that's downloaded and put in, the chips that are put in through the back of your eye and in your head, and in the back of your neck, they are viruses. So, all I can say is, if you choose to not have that, and you do have that, there are ways you can deactivate. There are ways if you really have to have the soul to do that. And so much of the information coming in from the chip is now taking over your brain. Like you see a lot of celebrities and they're like, there's something in my brain, that's like, they have those little glitches and stuff. It's because they have those AI chips. And it's part of a bigger hub, and that's the dark alien agenda. We are not really here to talk about that, so I'm not going to focus too much on it, but that's where the grays go. If you want to know the end game, it's not that they live forever and rule the world. It's that they turn in these sad little grays that have no feelings and can't have beautiful, loving sexual connection or heart chakra connection. So to me, I'm like, y'all do your thing, but
yeah,
I'm gonna stay in the organic timeline.
Right, exactly. And that's why, like, we luckily have our ability to choose and our free will, and making sure not to give over our power into something like that, where we lose our sense of self, our individuality. We are a collective and a unity, and it's good to be all one. But the reason that we came together as separate beings is to be our own expression. You know what I mean? That we're meant to be. if creation wants to express itself in every single way possible, that's what makes an individual unique and necessary and valuable, is that we needed you to be exactly how you are, so that way we can have that form of expression in an existence. So, we have to use our discernment when we're figuring out, is this a good being? Does this feel good? Does this feel bad? And follow the vibration that we most align with. And for me, it's the vibration of excitement and joy and creativity. A lot of the star beings that I work with, their big emphasis is on creative expression. They want us to just create and dance and sing, because that's what they do in their civilizations. They're just making music, making art, playing with each other. So that's always like why I try to really encourage, creative expression, painting, anything to get rid of dullness. They say that that's the quickest way out of depression, out of sexual frustration. They've even prescribed artistic ventures. Any of that, whenever you feel any sort of restlessness, that is your cue to create and create and create. And that's, personally why I like to work with them, because I find them to be very fun and imaginative, and I want to hear about how they operate and how they work and all their, levels of fun that they like to have. Because I find that a lot more interesting than being flat, and no emotion. So, yeah.
So beautiful. I just love what you're sharing. And I get the same feeling too, because they come to me. They always go to me whenever I travel. Anytime over a sea, I'm just, looking out. Like when I was in Morocco, I'll always see the light come, and it'll just sort of shimmer and it'll dance. What I call it is dancing. Like they're like, or they'll just make me laugh, because I'm like, oh my God, you guys, I can't believe you right now.
Yeah.
And I feel like they're always like playing with me, the benevolent beings that I'm connected with. And they tell me to lighten up.
Yes. Yeah, that's
because I get so intense sometimes, and then they're like, they'll just dance a little bit, and I'll just start laughing. I'm like, oh, you guys.
Yeah, like my favorite being that gets channeled, Bashar, his quote is, the fastest way to enlightenment is to lighten up. We can't be so heavy and dense and carry all this like burden on our shoulders. We just have to like let it go and relax a little bit. Like, I'm not saying to not embrace the totality of your emotions, but also how much power are you willing to give it? How long are you going to stay in it? And how, reclaiming your power to being able to move on to a different state of being. And I think that's has been my favorite part of communicating with extraterrestrials, is it's thrown me into the journey of self-healing. Because I didn't communicate with them on the impression that they were going to just come and fix everything for me, that I would receive magical downloads in my sleep, and all of a sudden I'd be so knowledgeable and whole and put together. It was just kind of like working with a friend, how a friend and you can talk to each other and kind of provide free therapy and, work through issues together. They've offered me perspectives that I couldn't have maybe concluded on my own. And though I don't, worship them or anything like that, I thank them as I would a friend who's given me great advice. And with that advice, I'm able to be like, wow, I can see what I'm afraid of, and that I don't want to be afraid of that anymore. And, fear just comes from not knowing, from the unknown. So the more we can explore the unknown and familiarize ourselves with things that were originally a little fearful, then we can realize, wow, it's not as bad as I thought. In terms of these light love beings, they may look different than us, but then on approaching them and communicating with them, we realize like, wow, they're not so different. They have family units. They like to have parties. They like to joke. They always have a great sense of humor. And so, yeah, just healing all those parts of myself that I need to be able to move forward, you know what I mean, that to not be afraid anymore.
No, they always give me that spark. I mean, anytime it's night and I'm just like thinking and I just look out a window, I'll say, I'm like, how do you guys know exactly where to go? Like, how do you know exactly where to go that's going to be right in my eye line? I have no idea. All I know is that they're, you know, the light beings, we're talking about the light beings, they're the way I can describe it is that they're a soul family, because they're linked up to my thoughts in a way, you know,
right?
But it's not in a way that's manipulative, whereas the AI actually will start to permeate thoughts into your mind. It actually will tell you what to do. You know, it influences you. But it's not based on love. It's based on control, the whole pyramid thing. So when I get connection with them, they're like, it's like free will. Like they know everything I'm thinking. They know everything I'm doing, but they're letting me do my thing. And then when I need a moment and I'm just looking out the window, they're right there just playing and dancing. I mean, I've had some great laughs and I've had some great cries with them. And, you know, sometimes I'm like, I can't even believe it. Like, this can't even be real. But I was just in San Francisco and I was driving back from my cousin's, you know, friend's family's house. And all of a sudden I see this, ship, and I'm like, whoa, you're really close to the freeway, like really close. And then I just think, yeah, if you're really a you know, ship that's connected with me, like drop low and race ahead of me. That's what I think. And then all of a sudden I was like, whatever. And I was like, you know, and then I look and I'm like, oh my gosh, they dropped so low, like below the buildings, and they're like over the water. And I was like, okay, guys, you got me. You know what I mean? There's that playful banter where sometimes I'm in disbelief and then I'm back into belief. I'm always believing, but sometimes there's a certain part of your mind that's super rational. That's like, whatever, I don't even believe this. You know what I mean? Even though I've seen it so many times and I've had so many different contacts. But then you go back to the part that's the non-judgmental part. But then that part of me is where I giggle and I get a great joy out of it, because I'm like, you know, like I'm like, you guys raised me one, you know. I don't know. It's just this funny connection. It's a very loving. It's very kind. It definitely feels like soul family, and it's like so unconditionally loving. There's no judgment at all. Where sometimes it's hard with humans because there's so much judgment. Like you do this. Like there's judgment around everything. So you feel like it's really hard to just be yourself around certain people because everyone's got judgments, and it's like, then they put that energy like, and you're like, whoa, I'm not trying to feel that right now. You know? Whereas they're just like, you do what you need to do to learn. And the feeling I get and the message I get is like, we understand you're eternal. You're one of us. You'll come back. It's not, you know, this is just one part. It's an important part. You're here for an important reason, but it's just one part. Like, you're infinite. That's the message I always get, is you're infinite. They always tell me you're infinite. And they always tell me you'll forget. You're going to forget us. Even when we show ourselves to you, you're going to forget us. And it's so true, because I do. And throughout my whole life, like I've had this like remembering, forgetting, remembering, forgetting, remembering, you know? And so it's like this little game, but I'm so grateful when I do see them, because I remember. And don't you feel like that? Like they're reminders of your divinity, or some part of you that's so much more than just this physical, you know, being.
Yeah, exactly. Where after I had my experience and my sighting, I spent the whole next day, but not even that, the next week, the next month, the next rest of the year, just kind of really settling into who I really was again and what life meant. And all of a sudden, my whole reality was kind of shattered. I had to ask a friend, I was like, how do I just go back to work after that? You know, where I've literally seen something materialize and then dematerialize in front of my eyes, and everything's different. I can't go on just living the same way. And like you said, it reminded me of my divinity. It reminded me of my power. It reminded me of, the divinity of everything around me. And I just felt so empowered, and never again could I let doubt settle in. I had to tell myself that, where I was like, don't ever tell yourself that you imagine that. I was like, right now, let it be known for the rest of your life that you did not imagine that. And I still have instances where I see a ship and I'm like, no, I didn't see that, or I imagine that. And I get doubt nowadays, but I can't ever deny what I saw that one day in 2015. And it doesn't matter to me now when skeptics come up to me, because I'm like, you simply didn't see what I saw. And you can have that experience too if you decide to open up to it. But you know what I mean? It's not, my experience isn't dependent on other people's beliefs anymore. And yeah, so I'm just so awakened and empowered by what I witnessed. And after that sighting, I had tried very hard to recreate it, where I wanted to see it again in the physical. And I had this like crystal that I was like channeling the ETs through. And I was sort of scrying and talking to the crystal. And the crystal, the ETs communicated to me that they were like, stop looking outside of yourself. Stop needing to see this physical confirmation. We've already shown you. We've shown you. They're like, now it's within you. Whenever you want to talk to us, we're here. We're now. It reminds me that disclosure is now. A lot of people are waiting for it, and they're, trying to find a prediction of when it's going to be, and they're asking the ETs, when are you going to touch down? When will the world know? And I'm sure that that's going to happen soon enough, but it's now. It's happening on an individual basis. It's dependent on all of us sharing our experiences. I think in the past, we would have a sighting and then keep it to ourselves out of fear of sounding crazy. And and like now it's very important to share and talk about it and not be worried about sounding like a nutcase. People will get over it. They will. And so that's what I'm on a mission to do, is just keep telling my story and keep spreading what I know, in hopes that it'll just keep awakening people to want to seek out their own experience.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Like, don't take it from us. Go have your own experiences,
Yeah.
And I always have conversations with people. I'm like, I had a hairdresser, and I was just like, yeah, gosh, I was living in Malibu. I'm like, I keep having these contact with these beings, and they keep flying over my place. And she's like, oh wow. She's like, I haven't thought about it for years, but I had an experience myself. She's like, she lived in Oregon, and a huge silver ship had been landed in her, I guess it was like the field next to her or something. And she's like, it's so weird because I remember it, but so often it's cloaked in my mind. Like I can't even access it. I'm thinking about it because you just talked to me about it, and she's like, also I never wanted to be like weird or people to think I'm strange. So I just said that didn't happen. It just disappeared. And she's like, now that you're talking about it, I can see everything about it. And she described it to me in her experience, and it was a positive experience. And it's amazing how the mind will just shut things down, that because we only keep in our frontal cortex what we're using, like what we're actively using all the time, what's relevant. If it's not something that we can use in everyday life, we really have a filter back here. We just go whoop, and it goes right down to the very back. And it's only when someone else talks about it that we're like, oh, wait a minute, let me bring this up here. I just thought that was so interesting, and it was very sweet because then she had I think it helped release some of her shame. That's what I got, is that she had so much shame. She's like, well, I didn't want people to think I was weird, and I just didn't want to think about that. But now that you're saying it, like, I don't have any bad feelings. It was a positive experience, but I just wanted to be normal. I didn't want people to think I was crazy.
Right, exactly. Where I was reading this book, and it had a bunch of different accounts of close encounters. And this one story described this man who had been trying to initiate contact, but was a little hesitant about it. So he looks out his window and sees an orb fast approaching his house, and he sees it clear as day, but he starts getting scared. All this adrenaline starts pumping, and it's kind of like fight or flight mode. And he said before his eyes that the orb just transformed into a black unmarked helicopter, and that he believes that the extraterrestrials were able to pick up on his fear, and they wanted to show him, but they didn't want to scare him, so they decided to just change into something out of his memory. They're like, what's something safe? A helicopter. And he describes being angry with himself. He was like, oh, I almost had my sighting, and then I got so scared, so they changed it. And that's how it is, like literally in the memory sometimes, where we alter our own memory. Even if it's not the ETs doing it, we're doing it ourselves, and we're having to change things or put it in the back of our mind, or just forget about it, or pretend it didn't even happen, or just say maybe that was a dream. But the whole point is to keep awakening, and that sort of element where you don't remember something until you hear it. So that's why we need to just keep talking and keep the conversation going. That's what I personally feel that I'm here to do, is to share my story and to share imagery and pictures and information to almost start to like familiarize people and to get everybody used to it and start to desensitize and bring more awareness. So that way we become more prepared for it. Because interdimensional beings say that they're not going to make public first contact until the majority of the Earth population agrees to it or is open to it. So I was like, well, maybe I'll help that process a little bit, and just keep talking about it and sharing pictures, and hopefully more people will be accustomed to, their culture, their society, what they look like, and that way we're used to it, we're ready. Even with the telepathy, where it's almost very important to start practicing nonverbal communication amongst our own human brothers and sisters, so that way we don't overload the brain when we're doing extraterrestrial contact, because that's how most of them communicate, is through nonverbal communication and telepathy. So it ends up being a very intense energy exchange. So the more we can practice it with our friends and our partners, the more we can kind of exercise and ready the brain to be prepared to handle this sort of extreme communication.
I agree. I mean, I think it's actually very subtle when it happens.
Yeah.
We have to prepare I think I was starting to take like healing courses, and I was ready for it, again. There have been times when I hadn't been ready, and it's been like lower frequency things. It was almost just like those were part of the contracts, that I had to deal with, because it wasn't like my brain consciously asking for those experiences. But when we consciously come from a place of empowerment, everything changes. And I feel really empowered around the subject, whereas before I felt victimized in the past, from certain experiences. But I realized that I'm the co-creator, and that it's okay. Whatever happened was part of my contract, what I agreed to. But now really honing in on those positive experiences, those high frequency ones that really activate me and elevate me, and that are empowering for myself and for others. And that's what I'm calling in. So, like I said, there might be people that feel victimized in certain situations, but I really feel like that's so much in the past. I don't know, it's just my feeling is like,
right,
the whole abduction thing, that was a really big thing that was going on for quite some time. It was major, heavy, and our government was very much involved in the agreements to this is one specific type, and we're talking about the grays, aka our future selves that got hooked into the AI and the transhumanism, and who are trying to recreate themselves to be more like us again. So if we did have individual contracts, then Don't judge yourself. I sort of went through a process where I was very upset, and then I just forgave myself and the beings, and I'm like, okay, I'm choosing something new, because through the whole process there was always the benevolence coming in, and I think that's just so important to know. I just wanted to state that, because some people might have an adverse reaction and be like, no, they're all evil or they're all good, and it's not like that. It's about discernment and what you're calling in from here, your heart chakra, and here, your mind. And our thoughts have so much to do with it. Like, they are telepathic, and they can read our thoughts. So that's how we call them in. I've called them in by being like, come here now, and then they come. And like you said, we co-create our experiences with them, and they can be positive and they can be beautiful, and they don't have to be based on the models of the past, which I know a lot of people are scared of. A lot of people are scared, and I don't have any fear, because I know that at this stage of my life, nothing that I don't want to touch me is not going to touch me. I'm like, no. And I put that energetic boundary up. It's not happening. Goodbye. Get out of here. The ones I want, I'm like, come here. So I've really created my own strong energetic boundaries. Because as an empath, I was just, and I'm a triple Pisces, I was just open to everything, the soup of it all. And so we want to be discerning and call in what we want to experience. So I really appreciate your share, and how you were able to have those high vibrational experiences, because it really kind of releases the anxiety that a lot of people have, that there are other beings out there.
Yeah, exactly. I just, want to start healing from the past. There's been a lot of damage done, and betrayal, and things that felt like they were against our will, and it was partially so, on account of the government agreeing to these experimentations and things like that. But I did, start to recognize that they were something that happened to previous generations and a couple decades ago. And I'm not saying that it can't happen now, but we're entering into a new light age, a new light era, where we want to heal and reestablish those connections and to do better moving forward. And then we have an equal part to play in that as well. And now we're learning about our abilities to really establish what kind of connections that we want to have, and to retake our power, to reclaim it, that despite whatever happened in the past, that now we have been re-empowered and know how to work around that, and to do better, and to attract more loving experiences for us. So I think that we never want, we always have to acknowledge all sides, very important, but also start to welcome in healing and growth. And our star brothers and sisters, they want to communicate with us. We're all a cosmic family, and they want very strongly to reintegrate us into their family on a conscious level. So I just am very excited for that to be happening in the present moment, and to keep coming up into the future. And I'm very excited to see what sort of co-creation we can all have together once we're all united again.
It is so beautiful. I love that. I love every bit of it. And yes, they're waiting for us. Our ancestors, our brothers and sisters, they are our cosmic family. And it is going to take some time for many people to heal from the fear and some trauma. And I'm glad we had this conversation, because I think this is the beginning of starting a conversation, where we talk about both, positive and negative. We're not just up in the air like, oh, it's just one love, or oh, it's just darkness. It's not like that. We really need to be conscious and pull in the experiences that we want now, because right now we're at a place where we're manifesting much faster. The whole frequency is much faster and lighter. So we want to create much more intentionally than we were in the past, and I didn't think we knew how to before. also, like, don't have any blame out there, you guys. If you have had any negative experiences, like I have, and positive, very, very more positive than negative, then don't blame yourself or beat yourself up. You know, it's not like, oh, you attracted negativity. Like, sometimes we just have contracts. Sometimes we have to go through things, and it's not about beating yourself up or thinking you're a bad person because you created negative experiences. It's just an experience, and we can heal from all experiences. So what I did is I released all shock and trauma, all of the distortions, and then I just had to do forgiveness. And then I said, well, this is what I want now, you know? So it's really important to have a great forgiveness for yourself, for the agreements we made sometimes before we incarnated. But now we're coming into a time where we want to celebrate our lives as galactic humans. You know, we want to start celebrating, and I really want that, you guys. Before, you know, while I'm alive, I want that conscious. I want that where they're coming in, where we're connecting. You know, and I hope that happens in my lifetime, in your lifetime. Because I mean, I've had many past life regressions, and many times I've been non-human. So being human is like the more weird part for me. But we're all one, you know. And thank you so much for coming on. I loved your share and such a beautiful story. So maybe we can come on again and share a little more about different species and things like that.
Yeah, I would love that. That would be great.
Thank you so much for joining us, you guys. Please make sure you press like, share, and subscribe, and we will be sharing more with you. If you have any specific questions you'd like, you know, for us to answer, please DM me, and I'll be sure to ask her, and we'll bring it back on the show, because we're all about sharing. We're here to bring more information to you because we love you. Much love. Mwah. Blessings in your day. Bye.